Chapter 1. This is how Mortimer Tate ended up killing the first 3 human beings he'd laid eyes on in nearly a decade. A wreath of cloud lay smooth and still about the top of the mountain like bacon grease gone cold and white in a deep, black frying pan. The top halves of evergreens poked through the cloud, frosted from last night's snow. The final days of winter, not too cold. Mortimer Tate estimated maybe 30 degrees. The thermometer had burst in the 3rd year, that most bitter winter when it had gotten to 20 below or more. The thermometer had been made in America by a small company in Ohio. Nothing was made to last anymore, Mortimer's dad had been fond of saying. Mortimer sat at the window of the cabin, which had been built directly in front of the cave. The cave stretched back deep into the mountain. Mortimer sipped tea brewed from ginseng and tree bark he collected and dried himself. The coffee had run out the first year. So many things had run out that first year. Mortimer watched the men come up the mountain, had seen them rise up through the mist and had blinked at them, thinking he'd cracked up at last. But they were real, rifles in front of them, not trying too carefully for stealth, but neither shouting nor taking the mountain for granted. He considered going back into the cave to the gun locker, maybe getting the 12-gauge or even something deadlier. But then he'd lose sight of the men and he didn't want to emerge from the cave again only to find they'd gone or had spotted the cabin. And anyway, he had the police special in the pocket of his army surplus parka. That should be enough. He wanted to talk, not shoot. But of course, he had to be careful. He didn't figure they'd seen the cabin, obscured as it was by the pines and 2 months' snow. It was possible he could sit right there, and the men would pass by and never be seen again. Nobody had been up this far before, at least nobody Mortimer had seen. Maybe they'd hunted the game out farther down and were up after meat. Mortimer himself had killed a big buck 3 weeks ago and had eaten venison 4 nights in a row before drying out the rest for jerky. God damn, he was sick of jerky. I'm stalling, Mortimer thought. He didn't want the men to pass without speaking to them. Now that he saw them, he was desperate to find out, get news of the world below. But he was afraid, too. There were 3 of them. He could call out to them right now and be safe, holed up in the cabin. They couldn't get at him there, not even if all 3 came at once. They'd have to climb up the rocks and snow, and he could pick them off easy with the police special. But then they'd know about the cabin and the cave. They could come back with 12 or 100, and that wouldn't do. He'd have to slip down the side and try to catch one on the flank, open up a dialogue, and then maybe they could find out about each other. Maybe things were back to normal. The portable radio had devoured all the spare batteries so fast, ran out even before the coffee. But it had all been bad news. And when the last batteries had finally given up the ghost, Mortimer wouldn't have replaced them even if he'd had more. He hadn't been able to stand it, couldn't stomach another minute, the play-by-play of the world shaking itself to pieces. It had been a long time, and maybe things had stabilized. That was a thought, and it turned into a hope. Mortimer found himself sliding down the incline from the thick plank door of the cabin and ducking into a stand of trees. The leftmost of the men was just on the other side. Mortimer went through quietly, not showing a weapon. Strike up a conversation, sure. Maybe they'd be happy to see him. He weaved and ducked among the pines, finally caught sight of the first man, ruddy cheeks, dirty red hair with a red-brown beard. Patched denim pants and work boots, thick corduroy coat, also patched. A red band around one sleeve. He held a deer rifle, bolt action, .308 caliber. Mortimer was so close he could see the rifle was a Remington. Mortimer had one hand in the pocket of his parka, wrapped around the police special. He raised the other hand and